And by being here and buying your tickets, supporting Comic Book Classroom, it's a really wonderful program that is really doing some amazing things in the lives of children. And I'll come out here and support that. But I don't really want to waste any more time, and you don't really want to hear me stand up here and ask questions of a guy that you can easily ask those questions of yourself. And what you don't realize is he has been sitting among you the entire time. So ladies and gentlemen, Walter Koenig. There are mics on each side, so if you guys have questions.
Do my first line.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it that way. Let's open it up for a conversation. And if you have any questions you think you have not heard the answers to before, I'll be glad to answer them for the 30th or 40th time. Will you pick them out here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, so I actually grew up with two of the shows that you were on as a kid, and original Star Trek, of course.
I'm trying to look right there. Oh, okay. I got it.
And also Babylon 5, and I was wondering if you would like to talk a little bit about Babylon 5 and the experience of playing Alfred Bester, one of the most deliciously wonderful villains ever to grace the small screen.
It's very kind. I appreciate that. And I thoroughly did enjoy playing Alfred Bester. I had a great time. I consider it sort of act 2 of my career. It was that outstanding, even though it didn't stretch over a great many years. I was only involved with the show for 5 years, and then, on an occasional basis. That notwithstanding, I had a terrific time. I thoroughly enjoyed working with everybody. Bruce Boxleitner, Jerry, Billy, everybody down the line were just terrific. They were a team, and they really liked each other, and they brought me in open arms and made me feel very welcome. Joe Straczynski was the one who cast me. And I had actually known Joe a little bit. I didn't know him a great deal, but I knew him a little bit prior to B5. He had at one point he'd been a producer, story editor for a new Twilight Zone back in the, I think, middle 80s. And I went in and I pitched the story, which he liked, but the other producers turned down. But subsequent to that, he asked me if I would, actually with my wife, we went on and we did a radio dramatization of one of the Twilight Zone stories that he had written that was not picked up for filming. So that, he was in charge of a radio show at that time. So that was what cemented our relationship, if indeed you could call that being cemented. In any case, to make this shorter, he casted me in an episode of Babylon 5, and I was very happy to do it. It was an episode where two people get inside his brain. I get inside the Sinclair's brain. That was the first captain's name, right? Sinclair. And we screw around with his thinking. Alas, I was in Chicago about 6 weeks prior to shooting, and I experienced some severe chest pains, and what do you know, I had a cardiac incident. I was rushed to the hospital. They ended up doing a quadruple bypass. I was in the hospital 8 days, and not really, even though I was walking up and down stairs, per instructions by the cardiologist, immediately, next day, I was not really prepared to go to work. So I had to call J. Michael and tell him that I wasn't available to do the show. Now, what occurred next, you might think, is just a nice story, and it must happen many times. Well, what happened did not happen many times. That does not happen many times in our business. It is as cutthroat and as dog eat dog and as selfish as you've heard. I mean, this is the exception to the rule. Joe said first that he would try to hold back the episode until I was well. That in itself is amazing. I'm not a star. I'm not somebody who you would do something like that for. Well, in fact, they didn't have enough scripts. Can you hear me, by the way? It sounds awful. They didn't have enough scripts, and they had to shoot that script. And I was not able to shoot it. But he called me back and he said that he's creating another character for me. And in fact, the character he created was Bester. And this is the silver lining, in the dark cloud, because if I had done the first character, that would have been it. Been a one-shot deal. But Bester was written so that if there was any kind of a supportive reaction from the audience, they could bring him back. And that indeed was what happened. So, have a heart attack and get your part made bigger. So I'm expecting to have a heart attack in the next few weeks because I haven't worked in a long time. So that's pretty much the story in a nutshell. The people were wonderful. It was not a caste, the TE system. It was a classy system, and everybody worked well together. There was a sense of camaraderie. Everybody appreciated each other's works. The front office was great. I have just nothing bad to say about it. It was. That's why I call it a whole act in my life, because it stands out as being such an enjoyable time that I had.
In a time of pain impossible, Mr. Garibaldi, you're welcome to try. It was one of the best line deliveries ever. Just thank you.
Okay, when was it that I said that? It wasn't the go fuck yourself, was it? Was that it?
Over here on the right. Mr. Koenig.
Yes.
First of all, in line with what she said, you have a monologue in the fourth season of Babylon 5 that has always just been something that I've been awed by, your performance, and you're just giving exposition, but with so much venom. It's beautiful. My actual question, I apologize if you've heard this 1,000 times. When you read the script for Wrath of Khan, and you have that scene where Khan looks at you and says, I know you. Did you ever look to Gene Roddenberry and say, I wasn't in that episode?
You're out of your mind. What happened was that Harv Bennett, I didn't know Harv Bennett, and I asked to meet with him, and he said, I don't have time for actors, So it immediately made me feel like, what a wonderful human being and how well we were going to get along together. But then I had said something, I said, I don't want to meet with you about my role. I want to tell you that you have something in your first draft script that I'm sure will be eliminated and that has been brought to your attention. But you can't kill Spock off in the first act. I said, you just can't do it. Kirk, Spock, and the Enterprise are synonymous with Star Trek. They're the staples. You cannot eliminate one of those elements. And he says, oh yeah, right. And I realized that nobody had said anything to it. I mean, the death of Spock has got to be the climax of the story. And of course it was. When they rewrote it, it was. But he was impressed with that. He was impressed with the fact that I had mentioned that to him, which I think any screenwriting graduate from school would have brought that to his attention. In any case, he gave me the whole script to read. He said he wanted me to do a Trekkie run and tell me what shouldn't be there. Well, there were a few things. There's some moments, some words that weren't quite right. You would have known that they were written by somebody who didn't know Star Trek very well. But the one thing that of course I did see was, yes, I remember you, Chekhov. Yeah, like hell you remember. Yeah, it wasn't true. So I sat there looking at the script and said, here, I've been given a responsibility by the producer of the show. The show that has already developed an enormous following, people with tremendous loyalty to the show, and had a sense of the show's integrity, and they wanted the show to be, consistent and follow its biblical history. And I said, how can I, as an honest human being, as a person of some morality and ethics, not tell him that I was not the guy that he saw in Star Trek 1, or the Star Trek series? So, I thought about it and I said, screw it. There was a real possibility that they would change and give somebody else the part. They could have certainly given it to George, and bless his heart, I love George, but I don't love him that much. So we let it go. And of course, it was controversial, and it was a focal point, and gave me a lot of minutes at conventions where I had something to discuss.
Over here in the left.
Hi, Jen, thank you. I was wondering if you could share with us maybe some of the conversations that you had with Anton Yelchin and helping him develop the character that you had established.
I didn't help out Anton at all. No. Anton's, first of all, he's a brilliant fellow. I mean, just intellectually, he's a brilliant fellow. He had already done 3 or 4 films, and a couple where he had the title role. And he's done some very prestigious films, even since the last Star Trek. He is Russian by birth. He came over when he was 1. The curious similarity is that his father was a professional figure skater, professional teacher, as was my father. My father also came over from behind the Iron Curtain. My father's first language was Russian. But no. I met him on the set, and it was almost the last day of shooting. And he came over, and we talked, it was really nice. He was very respectful. He was a young man of 19, and you just sensed that he had his feet under him, and that he knew what he was about, and that he was going to be very successful in whatever he did. The one moment that I had with him was kind of cute, was after the premiere, which I had an interesting reaction to. It's amazing how you don't really know how you're going to react in every situation until you're confronted with it. Particularly if it's a new kind of situation. I didn't know. I'm digressing, but I think I'll remember where I was. Now I've forgotten what I was digressing to. I don't remember what I was digressing to. But to answer the other question. So, I know what it was. I didn't know how I was going to react to watching the movie with a new cast. Whether I had such proprietary feelings in general that I wouldn't be able to enjoy it, and particularly in terms of the character of Chekhov. I just didn't know what I was going to do. I'm totally capable of being envious and bitter, and, and jealous. I have all those very unpleasant characteristics as part of my personality. Not all the time. Most of the time I'm okay, but once in a while those things happen. But I went in and I sat down, and within 2 minutes, I was totally lost in the movie. I wasn't making comparisons. I wasn't saying, well, this is the way we would have done it. Oh, he doesn't have the right attitude. I just thoroughly enjoyed the film. I was a total fan. And when it came to Yeltsin, I just watched it as a character in a movie. It didn't have anything to do with me. Except for the one line where he stumbles over victory. I thought that was hilarious. I laughed a lot at that. Okay, now, moving a little bit more forward. We had the premiere, and all that happened. And then there was a big party in a parking lot. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people there. And I saw that he was surrounded, Anton was surrounded by a group of people. And I was on the periphery, and I was just going to kind of wave and keep going because he was so busy. And he yelled, Walter, I've got my own action figure. So now we're really brothers. Yeah, I'm very proud of myself. I as I say, I'm capable of all these unpleasant reactions and impulses, and I was able to, without trying, I was able to be generous of heart and genuinely enjoy the film, as I did the second one, without any sense of acrimony or jealousy or anything. I couldn't.
This one is a two-part. How do you feel about Star Trek, the show, sort of being a blueprint for modern day's pursuit of technology? And when you guys were filming these episodes back in the 60s, did you ever think that there would be a time where man could say, beam me up, Scotty, and it would actually happen?
Well, that hasn't happened yet, to my knowledge. We haven't achieved that. Although, if I forget, remind me, okay? But I gotta tell you a very quick story that refers to that, or that addresses that. I was in an airplane. We were going to Canada, and we were close to landing, and the captain came over to PA and said, we're having a problem. And we're not sure whether the problem is in the board itself or is in the structure of the airplane. But a warning light is going on that says that the landing gear hasn't locked in place. So if you look out your window, you'll see fire trucks and a foam tarmac and an ambulance. We think it's just the light in the instrument panel. But because it may not be, we're asking you all to bend over and grab your ankles. I never understood why that was supposed to make me feel more secure. But there I am on one side of the airplane, bending over, holding my ankles. And there's a guy on the other side of the airplane, and he's in the same position, yelling, hey, Chekhov, what did you do on the Enterprise when this happened? So I said, we beamed down, numbnuts. So, what was the question? I'm serious.
Sorry, I was laughing a little bit too hard to hear that.
What did I think of the technology? That I think it was a heralding of what the future might show us.
Yes.
That was the first part of it. But you got to know that I'm not very good with technology. I mean, I never even had a system. Oh, I had a system for pressing buttons. My system was, if I was feeling envious, I could push the green button, If I was feeling cowardly, I pressed the yellow button. If I was in a rage, I pressed the purple button. That's simply the way I did things when I was at the Navigation Council. As far as all the technical stuff, the tricorders and the cell phones that that are going to come from it, I think it's great, and I think we can take some responsibility and some pride in it. I think they would have evolved anyway, these things. I think society and the high speed of our lives now would have dictated that those things happen. So it's nice to say that Star Trek had a hand in it. My sense is that regardless of whatever participation we did or did not have, we would be in the same place right now in terms of technologically, which means that I'm still back in the 60s because I can't do anything. I can't do anything on it. The cell phone, the internet, Jesus, it's just awful. It's just the thing that I thought you were going to ask me, maybe you did, and that was the second part of your question. And this is where I go into, this is where I get on my soapbox a little bit and speak with a certain amount of diatribe. We were presenting a time in the future when at least the different cultures and ethnicities and races on this planet had achieved some harmony and some camaraderie and some sense of being able to get along. And I thought that was an extraordinary statement, a very positive one, and one that, that projected well as far as the future was concerned. I'm very sad to say that I don't think we've come anywhere near that. I think in our country particularly, there's so much pettiness and racial antagonism and narrow-mindedness and lack of understanding. So many angry, bitter people that we have not really made great strides towards the time we were envisioning on Star Trek. Sorry if I offend anybody, but that's the way I feel. It's very depressing. The one thing that I can operate is the news of the day and the clips and so on that I see on the internet. And so much of it is about killing and hatred and anger and people not getting along. I know there are good people out there. I know there are wonderful people out there. People who do charitable work and who come to the aid of others. I just would like to think that we were further along, or that at least that the people who are the rotten apples didn't have such a large voice, such a big voice, that we could drown them out a little bit more easily. Okay, enough seriousness.
Good.
Hello. I am a big Star Trek fan, in case you can't guess. I noticed in the show they tended to put a lot of emphasis on being Russian in many episodes and nuclear vessels and whatnot. Were you ever asked to act more Russian than was natural? Did they ever say that I want more of an accent than you're used to doing?
It's curious you should mention that, because I've gotten every degree in the rainbow as to how authentic that was. I had people tell me that it was really over the top, which I've never thought that, but it certainly isn't as authentic as it could be. What I was always lacking was there's a certain lyricism, a certain cadence to the speech that I was never quite able to conquer. And this, bear in mind, my father was Russian, and he spoke with a Russian accent. It wasn't a heavy Russian accent, but it was. So I've gotten that, then I've got people, I was early on, in the late 70s, I went to a convention in New York, and by this time I was already getting a little sensitive about the accent. And because I'd gotten comments from college students who said they were taking Russian in college, and their teachers told them that the V and the W are not pronounced the way I pronounce them. Well, that's not right. That's not true. That is wrong, goddammit, because that is the way it is pronounced. Not every Russian dialect. In the same way, not every German dialect. But there are German dialects as well, where they interchange the V and the W. So anyway, I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, and I'm at a convention, and two young women come to me and say, "Hello, Mr. Chekhov, we are from Soviet Union. We love you." And I said, "Okay, you don't like the way I do the accent? I'm sorry, I can't please everybody." She says, "What are you talking about? We're from Soviet Union. We love the way you do the accent." So that's one of the good moments. You know.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering what your favorite memory of being on set, whether that was Star Trek or any of the other projects you've been involved in. What is your favorite memory from working on those?
Well, I think I have my most rewarding moments on stage. I've done some fairly interesting work. I did a play called Steam Bath, where I played God as a Puerto Rican towel attendant in a steam bath. It was great fun. I did a play called, See, as soon as I'm about to say it, a little voice in my head says, "No, we're not going to let you. This is one of your punishments. We're going to embarrass you in front of all these people." White House murder case. Where I played a CIA agent. It was a black comedy, as was Steam Bath. Where I played a CIA agent who had been exposed to poison gas and was literally falling apart on the battlefield. And so, in one scene, my hand came off, and then another scene, my leg came off, and they did it with the way they built the stage around me, so that my hand and leg disappeared. And in one scene, I lost my genitals. And so I dug into my pants with my one good hand and pulled out this faux penis, which is sold in all the best sex shops. And I said, "Hey, look what just came off." And of course, I got a huge laugh. I liked that. I had a good time with that play. I did Christmas Carol, playing Scrooge. I did that for 6 years, and 6 winters, and I had a terrific time with that. I really loved it. We had a couple of performances each year. We were given over to junior high and high school students, and it was great to see how they responded and how they reacted to my performance. So where I go first is to the theater and the things that I've done there. I did a play with Mark Leonard called The Boys in Autumn. We did it here. We did it in Denver. He came to LA, I'm sorry, you don't know who I'm talking about. The fellow who owned the Star Trek Denver conventions before the present people. He came and watched us. His name was Steve. I can't think of his last name. He came and watched it, and he brought us out. And we did it on a stage, and it was very successful. It was a lot of fun. That was my whole intent, particularly in the early years, was not simply to come to a Star Trek convention and tell anecdotes, but to give back something that was more significant than anecdotes. So I did readings from novels. I did a 20-minute reading from Rats in a Wall by H.G. Lovecraft at several conventions. I had a good time doing that. It was pretty spooky. And we did this play, and then Mark and I did another play. And those were very precious moments. Now, specifically related to Star Trek, see, I did remember. Specifically related to Star Trek, the most extraordinary moment was when we were invited to the rollout of the shuttlecraft Enterprise. And it was out, I don't know, it was about 40 miles from Los Angeles. And I picked up DeForest, we came together, and everybody else was there. set, Bill. You know, you can say that. In fact, anything I mentioned, anything with a group, I'll just say except, and you know who I mean. And it was amazing. There's so many so many journalists giving us clicking pictures as we walked in, as if we had something to do with this. You know, what did we have to do with real life? It was quite amazing, and to be taken so seriously. And as I told you, that I have such a impoverished sense of technology that I was hardly anybody that I should be looked up to. So there was that, and all these people asking us questions. And then the band started up, and they started the music from Star Trek, which gave me goosebumps. You know, it was just amazing. Are we running into a technical problem now? We are? Oh, okay. You mean all these precious words have not been heard? Okay. So the music started up, which gave us goosebumps, as I said. And then, from behind the building, the rollout of the shuttlecraft came. And it came into view, and there on the nose it said, Enterprise. Well, that was really a cool moment. That was a moment in a million, you know. I felt important. I felt like I belonged to something important. I felt that it wasn't just make-believe, that it had eventuated, and that in some absolutely minor way I was a part of it. So that's really the most outstanding moment that I have had involving Star Trek.
Thank you.
So, as a fellow actor and a huge fan of the original series, how's the work schedule for an actor? Was it like, how early did you have to get up? Like 5?
Well, I had a little army cot that I had brought to the studio. They wouldn't let me put it in any of the sound stages, but I slept in the parking lot so that I could be available. No, I'm making all that up. For me, it was reasonable. It was like 7. For Nichelle, it was 6. For Leonard, it was 5. And for anybody in makeup, any alien in makeup, it could be 4, because they were in makeup 2-3 hours at a time to be ready, because it was a long process. It was not as expert as it is now, not as efficient, and it just took an enormous amount of time. And then we generally went home around, in the second season, because that's when I joined the show, we generally went home around 7. But if we were running late, they went to 8 or 9. However, when Lucille Ball sold Star Trek to Paramount, immediately was going to be less creative, less aesthetically sympathizing. It was all money. So they put in an edict that we had to stop by 12 minutes after 6. And why 12 minutes after 6? Because overtime was measured in increments of 6 minutes. And once you hit 6 o'clock, you were into overtime. So we literally had to shoot scenes, had to be out here by 12 minutes after 6. Now I'm going to stop here for a moment for one reason, to do a little advertisement. And if you take me up on this, you'll feel it's well worth the time. There's a young man, well, anybody's young, it's next to me. His name is Mark Cushman. He's a writer. And he approached Roddenberry and Justman back in the early 1980s about writing about a series. And he has, in fact, written 3 voluminous works, 600-700 pages each, each one about one of the seasons on Star Trek. What makes it so fascinating is, he said, it's all about what happened behind the scenes, and behind the camera. And what makes it so fascinating, it is not cut and dried and just figures, or it incorporates all of the notes. They all talked into a dictaphone, and that's all been preserved. And it's all the notes that Bob Justman had for the writer, that Gene Kuhn had for the writer, that Gene Roddenberry had for the writer, that J.R. Black had for the writer. He was the story editor the first year. And and the notes they had for each other. What you could do, what you couldn't do, what wouldn't work because it would mean the show would be too expensive. What wouldn't work because we started too slowly in the episode. We had to start in an action scene. And it's absolutely fascinating. And the amazing thing to me is that the writers went back and they rewrote. There were only the contracts only stipulated that they do an original pitch, a story outline, a first draft and a second draft, and a polish. Well, they had draft 3 and draft 4 and polish 5 and polish 6, and they kept going back and rewriting as they were asked. When you have that many cooks, there's a lot of contradiction. And so one thing is thought to be very good by one producer and hated by another. And then in the end, Roddenberry, bless his soul, rewrote everything, rewrote every script. He not every word, but he had the last say, and he rewrote. Anyway, it is fascinating. I read the first and second volumes. It's called These Are the Voyages. You can get them at Amazon. And if you ever had an interest in Star Trek, if you ever had an interest in writing, if you ever had an interest in knowing what was going on behind the scenes, it's a page turner. It truly is a page turner. Okay, the end of my commercial. What next?
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just going to go sidetrack here back to Babylon 5. Just out of quick curiosity, the farewell that Pastor always did,
Yeah.
Simpleton, was that something you came up with, or they gave you?
I came up with it, and they liked it, and then they cut it out pretty quickly. They let me do it 2 or 3 times, and they said, that's enough. This is not The Prisoner. Let's go on to something else. So that was fine, I didn't really intend to have that line again. I wasn't expecting it, so I wasn't expecting to do it again. But it happened a couple of times.
Hi, Mr. Koenig. Thanks for joining us today. Over on the other side.
Yes.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, as an actor, are there some roles or some types of roles that you're still looking forward to that you'd like to try that you haven't done?
I haven't done a deep throat too. I'm sure there are. If I saw a movie and I thought the role was really acted well, I said, God, how much fun it would have been to do that. But if it was done well, there's no point in my doing it. So, well, okay, there is one film that I wanted to do. And I quickly added that the actor who did it brilliantly. You remember Charles Manson, I'm sure, some of you do. He was the leader of a sect in the 60s, and they went out and they murdered a bunch of people. And these sect followers burned swastikas into their foreheads, and they all went to jail, and some got life in prison. Charlie Manson, who was not Charles Manson, was not at the site when the murders took place, still got life in prison. But these people really followed him. And I knew they were going to make a 2-part movie called Helter Skelter, which was adapted from the book about these killings. And I think it was an afterthought that somebody said, well, why don't you have Walter come in to read for you? This was after Star Trek. So I came in, and I had met the director. In fact, I had a screenplay about a Native American that I wanted him to get to Marlon Brando. Because I know Brando had a big thing about supporting Native Americans. Well, Brando supported Native Americans, he didn't want to play a Native American. So anyway, so that was like a year before that. So when I came in, he was not particularly embracing. In fact, he said to me, I think of you as a writer, I don't think of you as an actor. I said, okay. He says, but thanks for coming in. Well, I left there, and a couple of people, Joe D'Augusta, who was the Star Trek casting director, was one of them. And then there was another fellow, Burt Remsen, who was a casting director and an actor. They both pitched me to him after I left that he should give me a chance to read. So he said, he called me and said, okay, come back. Maybe it all happened before I left, I don't know. But he gave me the script and said, don't memorize anything. Don't try to sound like him. Just come back and read. So I took it home. And in those days, I was a little bit more adventurous. And I found that there was a drive-in theater playing Helter Skelter, playing a documentary on Charles Manson and the family. So I went to it, and I sat in my car, and I recorded his voice, just what I was told not to do. I recorded his voice, and I memorized the monologue, which he also told me not to do. And I came back, and he was sitting at his desk and he was writing. And I said, can I have a moment to compose myself? And he said, sure. And while he was writing, I started the dialogue. And it was one of those, I tell the story because there haven't been that many, so I kind of cherish it a little. I started the dialogue, and he heard my voice before he saw me. And he stopped writing, and he looked up at me, and he said, my God, that's Charles Manson. That's Charles Manson. And he repeated it several times. He says, don't go anywhere, don't go anywhere. He says, we'll put a beard on you, put a beard on you. We'll make sure your hair is longer. And I walked out of there feeling like I was in cloud 7. But we know what happened. I didn't get it. Elia Kazan, who was a brilliant director, he directed Streetcar on the Waterfront, Streetcar Named Desire on the Waterfront, and a bunch of other wonderful movies. Had an actor in New York who he was very proud of, a young actor, and he recommended him, and he got the part. And he was great. He was great. Nothing to cry about. But that was really one of the best moments I've had, because against all odds, I got the director to say, that I would have done the role well. And of course, if I had done the role, I think it would have changed my career. I mean, because it was a 4-hour show, and playing that character 4 hours, as evil as he was, I think it would have had a very positive effect on how my career would have gone. Yes?
Hi. So, recently I attended the Starfest convention with the lovely guest star Nichelle Nichols. And at the end of her question and answers, she sang the Star Trek theme song for everyone attending. And so I was wondering if you would sing for all of us.
You're all out of your mind. You think I want to sing?
As you've already touched on,
as you've already touched on, the original Star Trek was a great source for teaching unity, tolerance, and equality and all that. And I was wondering if you got any particular adversity or praise from your colleagues in Hollywood at the time, because, well, the 60s were the 60s.
Everybody was just worried about getting a job, you know, and thought we were lucky to have jobs. And they knew the show was popular, and they wanted to be a part of it, you know. So a lot of people were interested simply for the reason of getting on the show. I will end with one very quick story, and then I'll relinquish the stage, as painful as it is for me to do so. Many years ago, from running, I did a lot of running, I had a bad knee. My left knee was bad, and I could hardly walk. And I went in to see the orthopedist, and he said that, yeah, I had cartilage that had to be removed. He says, but it was going to be an operation that lasted maybe an hour. I'd be on my feet the next day, and off the crutches in a day or two, and everything would be fine. So I decided to jump at that, get rid of all that pain. So I went into the operating room, not knowing that the anesthetist was a huge Star Trek fan. So they put me out, and it was not an hour, it was closer to 3 hours. And ultimately, it turned out that I was on crutches for 6 weeks. This was a far more difficult surgery, procedure than they anticipated. So I was coming out of the anesthesia after all this time, and there's a face leaning down in front of me, and lo and behold, it's the anesthetist. He's looking at me and saying, "I got a wee bit of bad news for you, laddie."